human focus our ego has to quieten down so the other aspects of ourselves can become what we navigate by. So it's almost like having a 2-year-old in the room who's going, look at me, mum, look at me, dad, look what I can do. And it's like, and I can just zone that out. And as it runs around, and eventually it's going to get bored and maybe it'll read a book in the corner for a bit and we can get on with the higher self stuff. Do you know what I mean? Whereas if you're really run down and afraid and you like haven't had enough to eat or slept enough, and it's like, oh my God, there's just this noisy kid and I can't actually focus on anything because actually all my energy is trying to block out this kid. It's like that can be our relationship with our ego. Whereas cacao's a bit like, here I am. Seeing people, helping people realize how fucking amazing they are to happen in the ceremony. So I'm whispering in service, love, creativity, support, unlocking, community, connection, expansion. It's bringing us down to the truth of the connection to who we are on our deepest level. And that's the point where we can connect to everybody else, because it is the heart that we have in common. Here I am.
Beautiful human, welcome to the Embodied podcast, our show for a community of explorers, entrepreneurs and change makers focusing on human connection, wearable technologies and spiritual practices to create exponential results in personal well-being and business success through coherence. I'm your host Tobi. I'm here with my dear friend Phil. Enjoy this episode. Beautiful humans, welcome to our 5th episode of the Embodied podcast. Today we have with us our friend Helen Millar. So Helen has been part of a number of our forums and has led beautiful cacao ceremonies for everybody who was there. And so Helen is a ceremonialist. Also really interesting, has a background in the corporate world, and then has very much been on her spiritual journey with using cacao and all sorts of like beautiful shamanic practices that we think we'll tap more into today. So Helen, welcome. Such a pleasure to have you here.
Thanks so much. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. Really lovely. Really good to be back. I love your community, so thank you. Pleasure is all mine.
We always start with like asking, what is it that really moves you at your core? So what is the work that you feel called to bring to the world in this lifetime?
Great question. It's seeing people, helping people realize how fucking amazing they are. Because essentially we live in a society, like contemporary society is designed for many reasons to make people feel less than, essentially from birth. And there's been a whole, most of us were not raised consciously. And so we were raised by people living out essentially their trauma. No matter how great the anticipation was of raising children, often there's a lot of unconscious behavior that's happened as we've been raised. And then we live in this consumerist world which relies on people feeling that they need to buy things to be better than they are. And what I'm passionate about is stripping all those programs away until people realize how amazing they are and operate and live from that place. Because when we're in that space, that's not about ego, that's about the beauty and humanity and the spark of unique brilliance that we each carry. And actually it removes competition, unhealthy competition, and it removes all this like gunk that gets in the way when we're coming through our wounding rather than our brilliance. And so it's a lot to do with shadow work. So getting people to really look at the bits of themselves that they judge, dislike, hide, embrace it, because that's the only way to move through it. And then live their unique purpose through love, essentially.
That is brilliant. That's beautiful. And I really, I would love to hear the story about how you got in touch with cacao for the first time, and how did and in what way did it move you to do what you do now.
So cacao is one of the tools I use. It's very beautiful medicine. I had a very sort of strong, straight to the quick spiritual awakening through magic mushrooms. And that very quickly took me into other plant medicines. And I spent a long time working very deeply with ayahuasca, and then other plants like San Pedro and San Peyote. And I kept on people, and then it was a while till I heard about cacao, and I thought, what's chocolate gonna do? Like, I'm used to like all bells and whistles, like experiences, and those of you who've drunk the ayahuasca, for example, will know what sort of deep work that can be. So I was really judgmental about cacao. I didn't understand it. And I took it by accident. I was at a 5-day festival, and the cacao ceremony was part of the process. And I drank this cacao, and I remember how bitter it was, because this was a purist who didn't believe to put anything in. And I realized a few hours later, I told loads of people I loved them, how beautiful they were. And I thought, oh, there's something happening here. And then it was the second time I drank, which was at a friend who's an amazing sound healer. He was a cacao carrier and a sound healer. And I went to his sound healing and had 2 cups of cacao because some people hadn't turned up. So I had the double dose. And as I was lying there in this sound healing, I had the most extraordinary experience. And the medicine told me to work with it as a, and I had spent years working with other plants, as I said, and lots of people had said, oh, you drink so much, you should train. And I knew that wasn't my path. But cacao sort of called me forward. And then I spent a long time making sure that wasn't coming from my ego, and it wasn't about wanting to be behind an altar and doing all my training. And it took a couple of years till I started holding ceremonies. And then I did, and they grew exponentially with very little sort of effort from me. It was like the universe was just like, yes, here you go. Here are the people, and so it grew and it expanded, and then lots of things kept on happening to make sure that I kept doing the ceremonies, and they have been wonderful. And they've now, that's led into me setting up my community and my weekly groups, and I do one-to-one, and I design ceremonies especially for people for special occasions, which I love doing, whether that be working through trauma or, celebrating a wedding or something like that. So I met cacao with some resistance, but it welcomed me with big warm arms and allowed me to have my little temper tantrums and I got it. I got what a powerful medicine it is.
Yeah, it's really exciting because I remember the one ceremony that we did together with like head to heart, this like 6-week journey that you did. And I'm really curious because I feel for me that was definitely a beautiful transformation. And so I'm curious to hear more, like, how does cacao facilitate this heart opening, or this sort of like energy sort of transformation from maybe more sort of like ego mind centric to more sort of like heart embodied being ways of acting with the world?
So it works in different levels. It works on us physically. So it has these amazing properties that you can't find in other forms of food. So things we really need. It has amazing amounts of magnesium in it and arginine, but it also allows the neurotransmitters and the neuromodulators that make us feel great. So serotonin, dopamine, arginine, the bliss chemical, like the things that you might naturally get your body would release on a big run. And why people eat chocolate all over the world is because what lasts for a few moments in a chocolate bar lasts for hours and up to 72 hours, depending on your diet after a ceremonial dose, to exist through your body for much, much longer without them getting broken down. It stops the things that normally break those those chemical experiences in the body, and it elongates them. And so what this allows us to do physically is feel safe to open up more here. And what it's doing energetically is going into your heart space, which is really, I believe this, I mean, we live in a universe based on love, and the heart chakra is the love portal. So it's bringing us down to the truth of the connection to who we are on our deepest level, and that's the point where we can connect to everybody else, because it is the heart that we have in common. And so on an energetic level, it will allow you to feel the beauty of pure love, which is what this universe is made out of really. But it will also show you what is holding you back. So it can bring up, well, we hold grief in our lungs, which are around our heart space, but it will bring up blocks as well. So you can go from laughing to crying quite quickly with a deep cacao ceremony, because it bypasses the story. It's not interested really in working with your mind, and it's interested in just pulling away, like layers of a rose, like just pulling away very gently what's here, what's blocking you, what's limiting, and as an energy, rather than getting into like deep messages. You can get messages, but that's not its main sort of way of working with us.
Maybe just on a diet piece, what is the diet that one should have around cacao ceremonies to really feel these benefits elongated?
So things that keep your system clean. So it's a diuretic, so you want to, and it helps you detox, so you want to have a lot of water going through. You want to be really hydrated before you drink. As soon as you've drunk the cacao, I wouldn't drink for maybe 20-30 minutes, because you don't want to flush it through the system too quickly. But then after a ceremony or after a big dose, you want to be drinking a lot of water, because it's going to be releasing all these toxins. And if they get stuck in the body because you're dehydrated, that's when you can get headaches. And that's the same with any kind of contraindication. If you're on heavy medicines, especially antidepressants, anything that's a MOAI inhibitor, you're going to want to have a smaller dose, because you could get a migraine. So you say water is the answer, basically. Any bad side effects to cacao generally turn up as a headache. Water is the cure. So really hydrated, and then root vegetables are great, because you can feel a bit giddy sometimes afterwards. So keeping something grounded. And I would avoid any animal products. So I avoid ghee or butter, and avoid things that are deep fried, avoid anything processed, and just really stick with food as plant-based as possible for 72 hours. And you definitely don't want any dairy prior to drinking cacao, because that is what really inhibits the medicine from being able to move through the body in its most beautiful state. Caffeine can also be a sticking point, not so much days afterwards, but on the day of. I would definitely avoid having, I mean, if you are a coffee fiend, you might have a small morning coffee, but I wouldn't have any caffeine maybe at least 4 or 5 hours prior, and generally try not to have any on the day of drinking cacao, because it has arginine in it. And arginine is sorry, I don't mean arginine, I mean the theobromine. Theobromine is a relative of caffeine. It's not the same thing. The actual amount of caffeine in the cacao will depend on the strand of cacao you have, but it's generally not as much as you would get in a decaf coffee. It's like a trace amount, but the theobromine can be experienced similarly to caffeine, because it gives you a lot of focus, but it gives you that focus without maybe the jittering or the crashing or the paranoia that coffee can give you. But if you've already got a caffeinated system and then you have that theobromine, it can make you feel a bit overcharged. And some people, not for everybody, but some people are more sensitive, and there isn't really, you never know, like no one ever knows how sensitive they are to cacao, because it will change every time you drink, because it has its own consciousness. So it's different. It doesn't depend on like your body weight or your gender or anything like that. It's to do with your emotional, energetic makeup about how sensitive you are to it.
I love that. And Like I have I went from coffee, like I drank a lot of coffee and I used cacao to stop my coffee addiction because every time I stopped drinking coffee, I got a big headache, like a crazy headache. And to use cacao gradually changed to cacao, but cacao didn't feel addictive to me. So I could also very slowly go down. Now, I know people that drink this every day, like but pure cacao. Not and there is, I think, a nuance I discovered way later on my journey into this, and that is which kind of cacao. I've like at the beginning, I was pretty naive. I was just supermarket, like pure cacao powder thing, but that is a total different experience as the cacao you are providing. And I maybe touch a little bit on that difference because for me, I learned it way farther in the process. I was first drinking a lot of, let's say shitty cacao before I came to the real deal. So can you touch a little bit on that?
Yeah, totally. And this, I have lots of people like, oh, I have cacao all the time. I know about cacao. It's like, you can't generally, I have never come across a shop that stocks ceremonial grade cacao. You have to buy that from a supplier generally online. You can get some from me. But the cacao powder that you might get in like a health food shop that's 100% cacao and that's all that's in it is great. But the game-changing cacao is ceremonial grade. And what makes it ceremonial grade is the quality of the cacao itself, so the trees and the soil and how it's grown, but it's also how it's cultivated and it's how it's processed between literally being in a pod to getting into that powdered form. And the ceremonial grade, the two types that I import and hold are grown with people who understand it as a plant medicine. And for example, I've got some that comes from Ecuador, and that's grown by the Quechua tribe, and they hand pick all the cacao. It's not done through machinery, it's not done through processes, and the trees that are growing are 50 years old. So in commercially produced normal cacao, the trees will be young. They'll probably be pulling the pods off as soon as they can. And if you think about the wisdom, and it's the same maybe with ayahuasca, like the age of the vine will deepen the experience of the medicine. And so it's the same with the cacao. And it's also, it's like a 3-day process of fermenting the beans and with like different layers of leaves. And it's also to do with what's going on in the soil and what's the stand of the tree. And the cacao I have from Ecuador, like the roots of those trees, it's not just a cacao plot, they are growing amongst other plant medicines. So their roots are entwining underground. So it's pulling in all this other wisdom and knowledge as well that is going into, because we're working with energy essentially, so it's going, that energy from the other plants is also going into the cacao beans, and that is understood by the people who are picking it and growing it and preparing it. And it's also to do with how hot it goes, and this is really the difference between like a health food shop cacao and ceremonial grade, is that it's only very, very gently heated to get it into a liquid form, and then it cools into the block, whereas it will be just blasted with heat. It's still, 100% cacao, but when you blast that with the heat, that's when you really break down all those juicy, good neurotrans, the things that I spoke about before, that are gonna, and that they are the building blocks for this spiritual experience that you can get with ceremonial grade cacao, in a nutshell.
Yeah, it was interesting because basically what you just touched on there is like the building blocks for the spiritual experience. And I think this is becoming quite interesting in terms of maybe even looking at consciousness in a way. Because on the one hand, yes, we have these neurotransmitters that within our system kind of like trigger, certain experiences. Maybe like it changes like our serotonin balance or things like that. But then also there's this energy side that you said in cacao having that, conscience of itself. So I'm curious to maybe look at these two components a bit more, where we have the physiological aspects where the cacao changes our system and maybe shifts balances of certain neurotransmitters in us, And then on the other hand, that more, just energetic, basically, like we being a consciousness and the plant having its consciousness in it, how this sort of like intermingles. I'm curious to hear your perspective on that.
Absolutely. And so much of this is to do with intention. And this is often why I would encourage somebody to come to a ceremony to really experience what the spiritual potential of cacao is. Because if you don't really know what you're doing, or you're just trying it out at home, you can have a small experience, or you might have a big experience. But if you're not used to working ceremonially or shamanically, then you maybe don't know about how to hold space for yourself or set the space up. And cacao is like, I guess it's like thinking of like having a new friend. If you just rock up and you're like, they turn up at your house and you just like, oh, sit on the sofa, and then you get on with your work and you walk past and occasionally you say hi. That's the equivalent of like having a microdose of cacao and drinking it while you get on with your work, and you're using it maybe to replace coffee, maybe to, decrease your sugar intake and all those sorts of things. But cacao has the potential to allow you to think completely creatively, to see your life in a different way, to really tap into deep waves of creative potential that you hold, to open up your heart, to receive, downloads and all of those sorts of juicy things. And that can depend on dosage, but really that's to do with the intention. So if you meet a new person, you sit them on your sofa and you sit next to them and you ask them how you're doing, and you're going to get a lot more from that interaction with how much time and focus you put into it. So for example, when I'm making a cacao, when I'm like, I don't have other stuff going on while I prepare it. I might play specific music. But, for example, maybe I'm listening to a YouTube video. If it's got any kind of like negative energy going on, if it's something like truth or news or whatever, like I will not play that while I'm working with the cacao. Like I don't want that energy to be going into the cup. I store my cacao in glass with crystals around it. Like it's all of these things inform how deeply the cacao can work with you by how much attention and care you bring to your relationship with it. And so I will chop up the cacao and I'll be consciously praying, like, or intending, like, what am I putting into this cup? Why am I drinking this cacao? Like, I'm not just unconsciously munching a chocolate bar for the taste factor. Like, I'm drinking ceremonial grade cacao. Why? Like, what do I need? Like, am I blocked about something? Do I want to get insight into why a friendship's going awry? Do I really want to have a great meeting with somebody? And I want to get deeply into my heart space before I have that meeting. And then, especially like I hold weekly groups, like while the cacao is heating, I lean over the pot and I whisper in all the words that I want to happen in the ceremony. So I'm whispering in service, love, creativity, support, unlocking, community, connection, expansion. I'm talking this into my cacao. And then I'm holding space for people. And like, if I was a participant, I might be much more like into the cacao, but because I'm holding space, I've done that work whilst they've made it. So the cacao is then programmed with, how I'd like to work with it. And that's where you wouldn't necessarily be getting that experience with the stuff from Holland and Barrett or whatever. I don't want to slate Holland and Barrett, but like whatever shop you might have got this other cacao from.
At Embodied, it's our mission to empower life adventurers to self-actualize. So if you're on your journey towards self-actualization, if you're on your business journey and wanting to treat it as a spiritual quest, as a vehicle for self-actualization, then join us in our community at community.embodied.global for bi-weekly events, deep conversations. You have access to these podcast conversations and have access to the Q&A afterwards, where you can ask the speakers questions that you have specifically for the quest that you're on. We look forward to seeing you there. Lots of love and see you soon. So how do you actually implement it in your own personal life? Because I mean, you've given some sort of hints how you basically work with it, in preparation for the ceremonies and things like that. But I'm curious, how how's your cacao lifestyle? Or I mean, how do you basically, so do you have one like every few days? Do you have one like every morning to basically start your day intentionally? Or curious to hear like how it's basically a part of your life.
I get asked this a lot, like, can you have too much cacao, and like how to work with it. I would always work out why you're having it, because there are no rules and you know what's right for you. So it's the same with like maybe my, like how I use hape or any other kind of like shamanic medicinal tool, is like if something is becoming a crutch, if you feel like you can't get through your day unless you have your cacao, or like I would say you need to look beyond that, because ultimately we need to be able to operate like without being reliant on anything. But having said that, there are times where you might want to be working with cacao every day for 6 months, but you might then you might not drink it for 6 months, because it's about really understanding where you are, where you're meeting the cacao. And like, for example, I don't drink ayahuasca anymore, but for years I drank it lots and lots because I needed to work through a lot in that intensity. So now it's interesting. I drank a lot of cacao this year. I was holding a lot of space, and last year, but this year specifically, especially with the lockdowns, and I was just finding it really helpful to keep because I've been on my own for a long time, so keeping me in my heart, keeping me open and love fueled to create from that space with the work I offer. So I was drinking a lot, but then I've just recovered from an illness, and when I was ill I didn't drink it at all, and now I'm feeling to only drink once a week. So it's sort of, I feel like I've had a reset. But I'm always really conscious about, why am I going to it? Is there becoming like a needy thing there? Is it becoming like quite an unconscious like habit that I'm not actually then aware of, that I could be drinking a cup of tea, or I could be drinking a cup of cacao, and it's just out of habit that I'm going into the cacao. It's like just being really aware about what you're doing with it and why, I guess.
That's brilliant. And yeah, like you're so on it. Like if it becomes like really an attachment, then please go beyond that. I love what you're saying, and I also love what you were saying before that about the whispering, the intention, and the thing into the cacao. I really feel that works with a lot, that works with water, and you have Dr. Emoto's work. It works with plants, and it works with our own body. I really feel like literally you can program your own chemicals. I love that. I have one question that is a little bit personal, but I was happy enough to be in your cacao ceremonies that you did with Tobi. I loved it. It was my first cacao ceremony. And one thing that I saw you was very amazed by was how you opened the session. I felt so much flow that it almost felt like a channel, like something that came from higher consciousness running through you. I'm really curious if that really was the case, and maybe make it a little bit more general. When you're doing this work, are you really feeling guided by source, spirit, the universe, the cacao gods, whatever you want to call it?
Yeah, totally. This is okay. So before I answer that question, talking about water, because not everybody who joins my ceremonies can get cacao in time or have cacao, and not everybody can always drink cacao, but they want to come because of the energies that I bring in and I work with. And it is totally okay to join with water, because as you said, water carries intention. And in the same way, if I'm holding a ceremony, people come without cacao, I invite them to have distilled water that they put crystals with, and they set it up, so they charge up that water before they work with it. So that is totally an option for people, especially if they may be on very strong medication or coming out of operations or things like that, when they don't want to be drinking cacao. And yes, and this is why, well, my company is Heart Healer, Head to Heart Living, and cacao is part of my work, but it isn't all my work, because I do bring in other energies. And for example, on Sunday, I'm running a workshop on how to talk to trees, because I've had all 3 stages of initiation through the oak. So the oak is a consciousness, like cacao has a consciousness, and I work with the oak, I work with the yew, I work with the birch tree consciousnesses, and I have like very strong Buddhist practice, which is how initially sort of how Tobi and I's paths crossed. And I do have a team of guides, but my higher self, but I don't, it's not things that I usually articulate to people, because that can be a massive block to like a lot of people. And it isn't necessarily important for people to know what it is, because I'm not putting things into people. Like people's connection to their own heart, their own, what I'm creating is a safe space that I'm setting up so that people are safe to relax into their own connection to their own like source connection. I'm not, and in terms of what I see as a healer, is somebody who empowers people to heal themselves, because you can only ever heal yourself. You can go to the best Western doctor, Eastern doctor, metaphysical doctor, shaman. If you're not open to healing, the work is going to fall flat. So what I'm bringing in is energy to allow people to feel safe, to feel out of their normal defense mechanisms that we need to get through life, so that they can do the healing to themselves, from, because we're multidimensional, we're not just our little, you know, ego identities, so they can tap into their own space.
It's interesting when you say that with the ego identity, because there is, like, some people basically describe the ego kind of like this sort of shell that gives us like structure and support, but at some point you kind of like grow beyond it. But I'm wondering, like, do we maybe always have sort of an ego? But the question is like, where that ego is sort of kind of like coming from, and how does cacao sort of facilitate, maybe, I mean, curious to hear your perspectives. Is it kind of going beyond ego, or just like changing basically how our ego is at interface with the world, and we're just like shifting it to a different angle?
I think let me know if I'm not answering this question. I think our ego, I mean, we always have our ego. We can't escape our ego. It changes. Like the spiritual ego can be just as big and destructive as, you know, the unawakened ego. It's the aspect of us that is always looking for something to know what's going on with. So like, is that a level of competition, or look how good you are now because you've grown, or look how much more you know than this person, or look how much, you know, there's a sort of edginess to what happens with our ego. What cacao can allow us to do is allow the volume, like a DJ, like the amount of volume and focus our ego has, to quieten down, so the other aspects of ourselves can become what we navigate by. So it's almost like having a 2-year-old in the room who's going, look at me, mum, look at me, dad, look what I can do. And it's like, and I can just zone that out, and as it runs around, and eventually it's going to get bored, and maybe it'll read a book in the corner for a bit, and we can get on with the higher self stuff. Do you know what I mean? Whereas if you're really run down and afraid, and you like haven't had enough to eat or slept enough, and it's like, oh my god, that's just this noisy kid, and I can't actually focus on anything because actually all my energy is trying to block out this kid. It's like, that can be our relationship with our ego. Whereas cacao's a bit like, here I am.
Yeah, I like it. Definitely resonates. I mean, especially also the sort of like whole serotonin component within cacao, I think, is something that, yeah, I become like increasingly interested in, as I feel various like plant medicines, they work sort of like on the serotonin system. And yeah, I feel there's more research for me to be done to see like what happens. Because for example, like with MDMA and things like that, where you suddenly get all these like reserves of serotonin released. And then you feel like, wow, oneness and love and all these things. It's like, wow, you know, basically cacao has like small quantities and it just like elevates the serotonin level a little bit. I could totally see like, yeah, that makes us definitely feel more connected. And what you said in the beginning, where you walked around saying, telling people like how beautiful they were and how you love them. It's like, it's so cool. I really love that component.
And without the crash, which is what I think is important, whereas something like MDMA, because it is an artificial process that the body's then going through, you then have the dip and the unhelpful kind of paranoia and things that can creep in the same way with caffeine, like that can give us into this like, this charge in the body that actually takes us out of focus, or then we form addictions with caffeine. Whereas what I find with working with the natural plants is that those dips aren't there, because actually it's putting us much more in alignment of how we are naturally, because human beings, like our happiness level is not like we're at meh is default and then we get happy. It's like we can live happiness as the default, and everything that is other is an unnatural mental state. Whereas we've got to a place where contemporary psychology looks as meh as normal, and then happiness is an elevated state, where actually if we were living in a world that supports humanism at its core and treated all life as sacred, we weren't being bombarded with, chemicals and noises and sounds and experiences that deplete the human experience constantly, then we would be not constantly like not seeking to chase such an extraordinary artificial high. If that makes sense.
It definitely resonates. Happiness as a default. Like that.
Yeah.
And you spoke a lot about the chargedness that caffeine brings into the system. Can you speak to that a little bit more? Like what actually happens in the body when we get caffeine, and why it makes, because I feel in ways like our society, it almost like runs on caffeine, or at least like part of our society is really just like so caffeine driven. It's like some of these marketing agencies, like so many cups of coffee drank, like on their website. It's like, wow, it's almost like the status symbol. And I'm curious to see what your perspective is there.
Well, that was a conscious choice to bring that into society by the powers that were, let's call them that, the unhelpful forces that wield a lot of control in this world. If you think, and Friends, do you remember the TV series Friends? Like, and that was set in a coffee shop. Like, and I remember as a teenager, suddenly there was a Costa coffee and people went and sat in there, and I never drank coffee. I didn't start drinking coffee till I was in my late 20s. Like, it was, coffee was not a thing. We didn't have coffee culture. Coffee culture was a deliberately marketed and orchestrated thing to bring in, because when we are basically charged, it's really feeding the alpha productivity drive, do more with less, sleeping's cheating. And that is actually, it's using humans as machines rather than, it's really shutting down any form of yin energy, feminine energy, which is not about gender. It's about, we all have masculine, feminine energy within us. And coffee is a way of overuse of caffeine, is overriding that yin energy within us. And it's within the yin energy that we are open to connect to the universe. It's where we have that space for the void, create the void for creativity to flourish, for genius to emerge. But when we are deeply caffeinated, we are in like doing mode, which is really helpful if you're a CEO and you just want to get like productivity up. But if you want to be the CEO and you want to design and be an entrepreneur or whatever it might be, or creative, then you want to be able to step out of that kind of drive place, because that's not where you create the space for a relationship to flow, if you know what I mean. Whether that is a relationship with the universe or a relationship with your higher self or colleagues or whatever it might be. So I think the kind of caffeine culture was deliberately to push us out of our godlike existence.
I completely agree with that. I experienced it as well, you know, and the more and more I become aware also of my own brain states and of my fight or flight and, you know, of my nervous system, the more I become aware. And sometimes I still drink coffee. I really feel like, whoa, like first I didn't feel it, but now I really feel my head goes in beta and only wants to problem solve. And my body becomes so tense. And, you know, it's so hard for me to access those states that I'm very easily creating and very easily like designing things. Like it's almost impossible because it immediately goes back to that beta. Wow, thank you so much for sharing all of that. Before we ask the last question, please tell people where they can find you.
Hearthealer.co.uk is my website, and you can get me on Instagram as Helen Heart Healer, Facebook as the Heart Healer, Telegram Helen Heart Healer, and I have a YouTube channel. I go live every Tuesday, and that's my name, Helen Millar, with an AR, Millar. So those are the places you can find me. I have a free mailing list every week and a weekly community called Midweek Medicine. And we meet every Wednesday. It's a different theme each week, but there's always tarot for the week, astrology for the week, energy update for the week. There's always a guided meditation. There's a community share, and there's insights on whatever the theme is. So people can drop into those or join the membership program.
That's amazing. And we will also, for people that watch this in the recording, we will share this in the show notes underneath or above this post. Now, our last question, Helen, is about embodiment. And it's really like, if people not want to understand conceptually what we're talking about, but really embody and feel what we have been talking about here, what can they do to experience this on an embodied level?
On an embodied level, you can
how
buy
can they
some
embody
cacao
and
and drink it.
Okay. Done. Yeah, how can they embody your work and what you really talk about?
There are different ways work for different people. But to really understand what's going on here is to learn what to feel, where you feel happiness, and do more of that. And all the things that tell you, but I've got to go to the post office, or I've got to, the wheel